What is up, guys? Welcome to a new video. We're back looking at some more future changes coming which haven't even been pushed to the PBE yet but are being tested by Riot internally at the moment. Even though these could change, everything we're talking about has been said by an actual Rioter involved with the testing, and today we're going to be looking at the ASHE+JHIN nerfs, possible changes to Ghostblade and Duskblade, plus changes to Orianna, Naughty Assault still being an AoE stun, and Yasuo. If you enjoy this video, throw it a like, dislike it if you don't, but definitely let me know what you think of all of these changes coming. Okay, so a few days ago we talked about possible AD carry changes, right, that would feature Jhin and Ashe and one other AD being nerfed and a few buffs to others as well. If you want to check that, I'll link it down below. This time we have a little bit more info on them and what those changes could actually be. The first thing that we have to keep in mind is for all of these, like what Medler said a few days ago, 6.18 is going to be the Worlds patch, so what the World Finals are going to be played on, so that means 6.16 and 6.17 are going to have a heavy focus for Worlds and competitive play. Basically, if it's not a problem in competitive, then it's not likely to be touched until after the World Finals. Anyway, with that in mind, let's go into the AD changes. So Ashe is apparently at the moment looking at a W mana cost increase and a reduction in early Q damage, but it needs more testing, so we could see a change from that. If these go through though, it'll make her lane phase a lot weaker in my opinion, which might actually be exactly what we need. Ashe's Q is insanely strong, right? That is what's making her overpowered at the moment and where most of her crazy damage is coming from. Her W though is kind of like silly poke in lane and the early Q for an all-in trade after. So if we remove those two things or we nerf them, what is she actually left with in the lane phase? Like, I guess auto trades being good with her passive, that is nice and everything, but that is way harder than just pressing W, right? Like, it's going to take way more thought and actual like preparation to get a good trade off. So these changes are normally quite similar, so we can actually guess what it's going to be. Like Lucian's Q, for example, is 50 rank 1 and then plus 5 per rank up to 70 at rank 5. That means that, like, yes, it does more damage per rank, but it also costs more and it prevents like an endless spam of heavy damage. Ashe is actually at the moment just a flat 50, which is pretty nuts considering a rank 1 is only 20 damage and rank 5 is 80. That's a big increase in damage for no mana increase. In my opinion, that's a likely direction that we're going to see, at least for that one, but her Q also, like, is actually only scales with 5% extra per rank, 5% extra attack speed and extra AD. That is amazingly effective at just rank 1, and because it's a percentage increase too, it's like the extra ranks only really make a bigger difference when you have more AD with items later into the game. So this, in my opinion, would be the bigger nerf. Like, Essence Reaver kind of covers up the mana increase anyway if we go with that build. At the moment, you max your Q second, right? So any rank 1 nerf is going to last like a long time into the game while it's still sitting at rank 1. Maybe what we'll see is a switch to maxing Q first to negate those nerfs as soon as possible and avoid the mana increase on the W as well. That could actually minimize the nerfs massively and still let Ashe dominate. So overall, I still think Ashe is going to be really strong, like weaker in lane, but maybe max your Q or get the Essence Reaver to negate the mana increase. There's ways around these nerfs though. Next up is Jhin, and these changes are a bit more difficult to work around though. So the changes being tested are a lower AD ratio on his W and less base value, or maybe more like attack speed scaling on the move speed after you get a crit. The W AD ratio right now is 70%, which is not that unusual really. Like, I think it's targeted more at his passive impact though. He gets way more AD later into the game, so this is reducing his late game damage with his W basically. An extra like 10% off it or more could make a massive difference actually when you consider how much AD you have though. The thing is, Deathfire is still going to be a problem with your silly amount of AD from your passive. Now the move speed crit is interesting though, because it actually is one of these like easy trades that Jhin has in the lane phase. You get your crit shot, you hit the enemy AD, and then you run away while you're reloading, and it's so hard to return any damage with that. Like, a reduction in base could actually make him a bit less oppressive, I guess, or a little bit more risky in the lane phase. Basically, the problem in the lane phase is he still has a lot of damage, but it keeps going the entire way through the game. Like, he's always got a good and relevant amount of damage at every stage of the game, and that is not normal. There is no real obvious phase to abuse him, I guess, and we'll see how big like that AUD ratio is, and maybe the move speed thing helps a lot in the lane phase. It's hard to tell with those until you actually feel the change in game, like you actually play with it, but it's hard to see that's going to knock him like away from being top tier really. In my opinion, his passive with the current like armor pen build is the major problem. All that AD and armor pen after is just way too much to handle. So speaking of that problem though, are we finally going to say rest in peace to the Korean AD carry builds where they stick Ghostblade and Duskblade on everyone? So when Medler, the writer, was talking about the Jhin nerfs, someone said the problem isn't him, it's actually Ghostblade and Duskblade combo that is, which is kind of what we just said actually a little bit, plus his passive. Anyway, Medler added Ghostblade and Duskblade are going to get some work done, but it might not be until the preseason. They're testing and they haven't decided when they want to put it into the game yet. So that's already pretty good news in my opinion, but a few people were talking further down about Duskblade specifically and how the raw stats are so good the passive doesn't even need to be used properly, so buffing like the passive, lowering the stats might be good. The Riot Medler actually added possibly melee only is also on the table though. This was in the context of Duskblade, I think, but we didn't specify at all. It could mean Ghostblade as well. We don't actually know. Even if it is just Duskblade, that is pretty huge for any armor pen ability based AD carry now that won't be able to use this at all. To be honest though, I assume if it's melee only on the table for Duskblade, it's also going to be considered for Ghostblade too, and that could be a real issue for a lot of AD carries if it happens. I doubt anything that big could happen before Worlds though, so it's definitely a chance for after or just in the preseason. The thing is, Riot have changed the meta to be much faster, right? Tower first blood, like more gold on towers anyway. Dragons actually mean something. Now both of those mean it's easier to get a lead and extend it now. It's worse to play from behind. AD carries kind of struggled with that because we're supposed to be really good late game, but they adapted to be stronger early so we wouldn't be left behind. Ghostblade was a way for a lot of people to do that, right? You take that away and suddenly they could be back to more like early game picks being top tier and the rest just pushed away. It's not even just that. What about Graves or Quinn, right? These two aren't traditional AD carries. They are more armor pen focused, like bruisers with high values. You'd have to completely change how you play them in my opinion if you made that swap. Even like Jace as well has been using this more recently this season. I agree that it's pretty dumb having these items, but for certain champions it is the best way to play them at the moment, and that would suck some major balls if they removed it but they didn't buff the champs in other ways, I think. I guess it was kind of expected though. They are too strong on certain champions, but that seems like a major way to force a shift, and if the game is already early focused, then those champs could be so boned. The good thing is it's going to be easier to balance those for assassins in mind though, so you don't have like AD carries ruining it. The bad thing is some AD carries will suffer way more than others and just be like really weak compared to how they are now, and these bruiser AD carries as well, Graves and Quinn, will get hit really hard. Okay, well anyway, let's move on from the bot lane. I saw a comment last video saying I should rename my channel to Firebot from Firelore, which made me laugh, but okay, fair enough. Let's focus on the entire game as well. There are a couple of other things to talk about, even if those are the bigger ones, like the AD carry changes. The first is the Nautilus changes we talked about the other video, basically making his ultimate stun along the line instead of a very short displacement. Now those are still on the PBE at the moment, like crazily, they're actually still there. The other changes have gone for now, but this stayed, and the lock-in for 616 has actually passed, so it's expected to go live. This change to me is crazy. I don't know, I still think it's way too strong, and now he's going to be a massive stun machine, kill lane bot, and also top and jungle even maybe. I'm not exactly sure what Riot's plan with supports are at the moment, because they kind of shifted the entire meta to mages with these like healing buffs like the Ardent Sensor and the Crucible. Then they buffed Sona like out of this world and made her the top tier, like the premier support I guess for any single lane, and now they're bringing in a kill lane to kind of counter them. Nautilus has never really had this rep for being that great of a support, but he is amazing when he's against mages because he hooks them passive like, oh, they're gonna be dead. Like there's no way you can actually outplay that. I'm honestly dumbfounded because it's so strange having them shift the meta to healers deliberately, like they forced that into the meta and now they're forcing a counter in as well and making him a lot stronger. If you want more of my thoughts on that though and why it's busted, check out the last video, which is going to be linked down below and also in the top right hand corner. Orianna is another one though on the table apparently for 617, which could be really interesting actually. Someone asked about a rework and Medler was like, no, there are no plans for that. Orianna has a good kit, but she has been kind of underperforming for a while. The changes might look like more W move speed and also an ultimate cooldown reduction, but someone did suggest reducing her R mana cost to 100 at all ranks instead of 100, 125, 150, and he said he'd bring that up with the team, which in my opinion is pretty cool by Riot. The reason though I like this a lot is because we're in more of a utility mage meta in my opinion. Carry top laners, junglers, and AD carries, which means we don't necessarily need any more damage mid lane. Karma has been in the LCS a lot for this reason, and sure, not as good in solo queue, but Orianna is way more of a threat in my opinion. Like she's really good late game. My point is, if she gets some decent buffs, she can protect these carries and carry super hard with good ultimates. In my opinion, the meta at the moment is exactly what you'd want. Bit slower, you can farm early, then crush team fights and have other damage threats to carry with as well. It just doesn't fall on to you. This might be a really good time to start practicing her again though. Like she's decent anyway, nothing amazing I guess, but with some buffs she could be sick though, especially if you play pre-made in ranked. If you play like 3 or 4 man pre-made, she could be super good. Finally, there are some Yasuo nerfs being talked about. I don't want to go too nuts into these, but it seems like it's going to be after Worlds because he's not really a competitive issue at the moment. He's very vague about the actual changes, but the main point he makes is that tank builds are the first to be looked at on him. This like Frozen Mallet and Bruiser type build rather than the Assassin makes him so hard to kill while still dealing a good amount of damage, and that seems to be what they want to target more than anything. What it looks like is it's likely going to be a nerf to top Yasuo, but not hitting him as hard mid lane, I guess, but it's going to be more build focus I think than the actual champion focus. Anyway, let me know what you think of the changes coming. Remember to sub and share if you did enjoy this video, but for now, let's go to the robots.